Veterans Subcommittee in the Senate, and he was talking about veterans and the claims. The claims are years and years behind because what has happened with this Agent Orange, Vietnam-era veterans like you, they are now allowed to refile those claims and update the disability if they, had any already, or if they didn't, to get those. And then, of course, it goes on to the Iraqi and Afghanistan and, those veterans too. So, he pointed out in his interview there on C-SPAN that one of the big problems they have with the Veterans Administration, it was the last of the government agencies to go digital. They were still on basically paper and pencil, and to get into the big data thing. Social Security has went there, and the other government agencies have some computer programs in place, whereas the Veteran Administration did not, and that's one of the big problems right there. So they've got to build that, plus low priority. President Obama, though, is doing everything he can, given Tom Coburn and company's budget constraints, to get there in General Kaseki, to get the system ready. So they hopefully by 2015 they'll be able to knock the backlog down and process the claims as they should.
Yeah, Memorial Day is a special day for everyone, of course. Basically, it's for war veterans, but it covers everybody at this point, in memory of who did live and who didn't. And while I was in the service, part of my duty was accompanying soldiers who were killed in Vietnam back for funerals. And the roughest part I had was explaining to the family that their son didn't die in vain, but we know they did. And we've got an interesting history in America about Memorial Day, and we seem to gloss over some of the things, that the mistakes of politicians make getting into wars and people getting killed. And there's not much vested interest in even Iraq or Afghanistan, really, why we should be taking the casualties we have. And so it doesn't appear that we've learned much from a policy standpoint. However, the basic problem is when you criticize it, somehow you're painted into being anti-patriotic and anti-military. And that's not the case at all. I joined the Army. I served in the Army for 3 years, and did my duty and was proud of it. But that didn't mean that I agreed with everything we were doing, in Vietnam especially. So Memorial Day is a day of reflection, and I think we would be well placed to really take stock of our own foreign policies. Anyway, I appreciate you having me on, Buster.
I appreciate you, Jerry, and they can find you at jerrypippin.com and also on Facebook at Jerry Pippin. And you'll be back, hopefully, with your regular show on, what's the name of that network, Inception?
Yeah, it's Inception Radio Network.
Right.
I just talked to the producers this morning.
Okay.
It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do a live show for another month or so.
Okay.
But,
well, this is the first live.
This battle I have with cancer is truly devastating, and the battle's not over yet.
Right. Well, this is the first semi-live, actually we are live, that you've done, and we definitely appreciate that, and we ask people to email you at jerry@jerrypippin.com or at your Facebook page.
That's the best address.
Okay.
Jerry@jerrypippin.com.
Okay, very good. And Jerry, it's nice talking to you, and we wish you well, and we'll continue to keep up with your condition there. Thank you very much, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Good night. Memorial Day 2013, a day of remembering. The tone was set in our introduction by a Vietnam-era veteran and veteran journalist Jerry Pippin from the very red state of Oklahoma. This is a day that has been in the history of the U.S. It started out as Decoration Day after the Civil War, and it continued on until the time of Lyndon Baines Johnson, and it was made into a national holiday on the final Monday of May. Prior to that, it was on the 30th day of May. But nonetheless, it continued on as a Civil War event that in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the commemorations there were held in the 1800s. In fact, in 1863, it's a very famous battle site, and Union soldiers who were prisoners of war were held at Charleston Race Course. 257 Union soldiers died there, and the African American residents of Charleston organized a May Day ceremony in 1865, which was covered by the New York Tribune and other national papers. The freedmen cleaned up and landscaped the burial grounds and buildings, an enclosure and an arch labeled Martyrs of the Race. There were 10,000 freedmen that gathered on May 1st to commemorate the war dead. Involved were 3,000 children, all newly enrolled in freedmen schools and mutual aid societies. Union troops, African American ministers, and white northern missionaries brought flowers to lay on the burial field. Today it's used as Hampton Park. Years later, the celebration would be called the first Decoration Day in the North. David Blight, and we've talked about this before, described the day was the first Memorial Day. African Americans invented Memorial Day in Charleston, South Carolina. What you have there is African Americans recently freed from slavery announcing to the world with their flowers, their feet, and their song what the war had been about. What they basically were creating was the independence of a second American Revolution. Blight stated he had no evidence that this event in Charleston established Memorial Day across the country. The sheer number, of course, people died during the Civil War. It was a very large contingents, and we'll get to those numbers in a minute here. On 26 May 1966, President Johnson signed a presidential proclamation naming Waterloo, New York, as the birthplace of Memorial Day. Earlier, the 89th Congress adopted House concurring Resolution 587, which officially recognized that the patriotic tradition of observing Memorial Day began 100 years prior in Waterloo, New York. In the summer of 1865, a local druggist, Harry Wells, while talking to friends, suggested that it might be good to remember those soldiers who did not make it home from the Civil War. And not much came of it until he mentioned it to General John B. Murray, a Civil War hero, who gathered support from surviving veterans. And on the 5th day of May, 1866, they marched to 3 local cemeteries and decorated the fallen soldiers Waterloo still celebrates it on May 30th. So that is some of the various celebrations there, but nonetheless, the first one being in 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina. Another note to the American history. And we'll look at some of the casualties here that are celebrated. In the Civil War, there were 50,000, in the American Revolutionary War, there were 50,000 total dead and wounded. And we'll look at some of the other wars here. The Mexican-American War, there was 17,435. And in the Civil War, a very large contingency of people that were killed, 646,392. That's a total dead and wounded in that particular war. And then you go on to the Indian Wars, roughly 1,000 there, and various other wars in the 1800s. The U.S. occupation of Nicaragua, 449. And even the North Russian campaign, now that was 1918 to 1920, there were 424 people killed there. So if you start looking at these wars, they've been going on and people have been dying. There's another American expeditionary force into Siberia along the same time, 328 died. In World War II, 405,399 died. 1,076,245, that would be dead, wounded, etc. in the Great Patriotic War. In the Vietnam War, that's a figure that stands out, 58,209 were killed. In Iran in we won't get into that one. In Beirut, there were 266 killed. They were in a barracks there. The invasion of Panama, that was in 1986. It looks like there were 40 there and 1,143 total wounded, etc. In Somalia, let's see, there were, get my chart here, back to Somalia, a little bit harder to keep up with the chart, but nonetheless, it looks like there were 29 dead in Somalia. That was in 1992 and 1993. The first Gulf War, there were 149 dead there. And the Bay of Pigs, 4 people died there. We didn't want to forget about it. And in the Afghanistan War, 1,435. In the Iraqi War, that's 2003 to 2011, 3,542. And in the so-called War on Terror, they put those together. Roughly about 5,000 people dead there. So if you start looking at total combat types, deaths down here, that would be from 1775 to present. There were 848,193 there, and a total of let's see, make sure, killed in